Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I rise in support of the resolution that I've authored and introduced and will be considered on the House floor. And I'm going to calmly suggest that my colleagues across the aisle reassess their position on this thing. Because, you know, they're speaking of Republican majorities walking away from what they allege is a strong immigration reform and border security bill. That bill was not. The border security bill that we passed through this House, H.R. 2, was the strongest legislative measure in the history of Congress. It had been walked away from by the Senate, the Democrat-controlled Senate. H.R. 2 was condemned by your president, President Biden. You know who also did not like universally H.R. 2, Madam Speaker? The cartels. My colleagues across the aisle may want to wonder, how do you find yourselves aligned with the cartels? Oh, well, let us review. Since day one of this executive branch, this executive administration, since January of 2021, the policies of our executive branch were flipped to be more receptive to illegal immigration, and in doing so, more aligned with the cartel's operations with trafficking human beings and drugs into our country. Anyone with two brain cells that may occasionally bump into each other would realize that if you soften your existing law enforcement on illegal immigration, when on the other side of the border, the territory is 100% controlled by criminal cartels who are trafficking two things, human beings and drugs. What do you think might happen? Of course, you're going to have a drastic increase in trafficked human beings and drugs, which is exactly where we are. So Republicans took action in the first few months that we had majority control. We went through exhaustive legislative measure to battle through the language of H.R. 2. We went through an 18-hour markup in the Homeland Security Committee, my committee. And we brought H.R. 2 to the floor, and it was passed with all Republicans supporting that bill. It went to the Senate, and there it remained, gathering dust, Madam Chair. And Madam Speaker, we had countless efforts to communicate with our colleagues in the Senate, encouraging them, take up the bill. If you disagree with H.R. 2, by all means, debate and change, amend and pass your version, send it back to the House. Well, we'd go to conference, that's the way things work. But that's not the way it happened in the Senate. The Democrat-controlled Senate killed H.R. 2, which was a legitimate and strong response to the invasion that we have faced at our southern border. My resolution simply acknowledges and condemns the loss of our sovereign control at the southern border and the impact that this wave upon human wave of misery and drugs and human trafficking has brought upon our country, and the impact upon local and state law enforcement, who has had to bear the full brunt of the Biden administration policies, Madam Speaker. And these are policies. It can be flipped like that very quickly. You put me in charge of our border policy, find out what happens with cartel operations. They're going to have to take some of those trillions of dollars they stole from us, trafficking the misery of human beings caught up in their pipeline and sold their horrible tale of coming to America and prospering. It was sold a story by the cartels, and they were caught up in that trafficking. And how was that trafficking allowed? Because the doors were open, the borders were opened. By what? By lack of money? No. By change in policy from the executive branch. And local and state law enforcement, Madam Speaker, has had to deal with that. And those men and women have suffered. Those departments have suffered. They've been forced into crisis, not by their own communities where they live and serve, but by executive policies of this federal government. And my resolution is not meaningless, I say to my colleague across the aisle. It's quite the opposite. It acknowledges the service and sacrifice of the men and women that wear a badge at the local and state level across our country who have been horribly impacted by the Biden administration policies at our southern border, which has brought generational trauma upon our country. An era of misery we may never forget. I thank the gentleman for allowing me to speak for this amount of time, and I yield.